never visit any other country, you should visit Ghana. And if you never visit any other place in Ghana, you should visit Elmina's Cape Coast Castle. I don't know how many of you know, but Africa was not always called Africa. Even the name of the continent was colonized. The original name of the continent was Akabulan, which translates to Mother of Mankind or Garden of Eden. We had the pleasure of visiting Elmina's Cape Coast Castle, which is also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. I knew that this visit was going to be an emotional one, but not only was it emotional, it was life-changing. Our guide started out by giving us a brief history about the Cape Coast and Ghana back in the day and how this castle came to be.
They put it for our ancestors who were kept in the dungeons, but because they were so loud in fighting for their freedom, they saw them to be a threat, regarded them as rebellious. As punishment, they took them out of the dungeons, put them back in chains, brought them into the cell, locked the door, and they starved all of them to death. No food, no water. No enslaved African ever came into their cell and returned alive or survived. That is why we saw the skull and the crossbone, which has always been there and which represents death. This metal with the holes served as peephole for the soldiers to look through to see if anyone is dead. The door was opened. The dead body was taken out and thrown into the ocean. Look on this side of the wall. Look on this side. These are scratches of their nose. For European soldiers who misbehaved or misconducted, by going to town with the permission, they got drunk. Because the cell was meant for their own people. See the ventilations. For air to come through. How many soldiers were brought in? About 5, 2 or even 1. They had access to food, they had access to water, they were treated as human beings. Now when the ship arrived, all the men who survived in the men's dungeon were moved out of the dungeons, put them back in chains. And that is the middle passage that they had to use to get into the room of no return, where the journey is going to Antilan will begin. We are going there to see the door of no return. Now, you can see this room that we're seeing is the branded room. The branding, where they will see their identification symbols of marks, where they were identified by the owners to see those that they have purchased before moving them straight into the room of what? No return. Let's keep going. What's your head? Please, one first. Let Mama come first. Good. Now this room is called the intersection room. Both men and women were separated. So when the ship arrived, all the men who survived in the men's dungeon came through this passage. The woman who survived in the women's dungeon used this passage. At that time, there was a wooden staircase meant for each female captive to come down. So this was the only point that for the first time, both men and women could see each other, but they could not communicate among themselves. Why? They did not know each other, because they came from different areas with different languages. From here, straight into the room of what? No return. Please, Mama, come first. Go ahead.
I have to go down.
Okay. Hold on, Mommy.
Keep coming. Keep coming. Keep coming.
Thank you.
Now this is the room of no return. And this is the door or the gate of no return. We can see how narrow, how tiny, how smaller the size of the door. Why the size of the door? Because for easy control. 2, to dehumanize the Africans. 3, for easy counting. By narrowing the door into their side did not suggest that those that were captured were not strong they were, but based on the conditions that they were subjected to when they were captured, as they walked on foot for several days, weeks, and months, crossing rivers, climbing mountains and hills on their way to the dungeons, they were losing weight. In the dungeons, they kept on losing weight. So by the time the ship arrived, due to the weight losses, each captive would just fit through this door. At that time, the sea or the ocean was up here. So the ship docked some few meters away. They used wooden boats, transported them into the ship. They were parked in the holdings below deck as if they were not human beings. That the journey across the Atlantic began. Unfortunately, they never knew where they were going. They never knew how long the passage would take. The conditions on the ship, they had no knowledge about it. There was no point that their situation became better. It rather worsened from one point to the other. Today, if these walls have mouth to speak, they would have spoken better than me as a guide. Why? They saw the pains, the tears, the suffering, but their voices were never heard because they had been separated for good. This reminds me of an old African proverb which says this: until the lion learn how to write its own story, the hunt will always glorify the hunter. In other words, until the lions have their own history, the hunter will always be here. Today, if you travel to most European lands, including US, areas such as Florida and Wisconsin, DC, we see laws which are being passed that African history, black history, needs not to be taught in school. If all these structures are not preserved to today, many people would have disputed that this didn't happen. But now that you have all the evidence surrounding us, what they can do is to erase history from its original. They will try, but they will never succeed, because Malcolm X once said, history is people's memory, and without it, a man is demoted to a lower level. So younger generation are dying to own the narrative, to see the real narrative as against the sugar-coated narrative. None of our ancestors ever came into this room and returned. This is the only place they have to say goodbye to their own land, without knowing where they were going. They never knew the conditions, whether they would survive or not. As a result, others starved themselves to death in the dungeons due to the fact they used a metal called speculum aureus, in other words, a mouth opener, which was used to open the mouth of this captive to forcefully put something in there for themselves. See how a human being would do this to a fellow human being.
We visited the female dungeon, and it's here where the story begins to get even more heartbreaking.
Now this is the female slave courtyard. So all the rooms on the ground floor were used as dungeons, where 400 women were shared among these dungeons. So 600 men, 400 women. On the average of every 3 months, about 1,000 were shipped from the slave. And 3 months is go to a quarter, 4 quarters 50 years. So every year, talking about 4,000. We do a multiply by 235 years by the Dutch. We did the same calculation for the Portuguese. We're talking about almost 2 million Africans shipped from the slave dungeon. But in the dungeons of Elmina, some of these female captives were sexually abused. Because of the position of the governor, this is the balcony meant for the governor to stand, give orders to the soldiers to have the gate open anytime he desired to satisfy himself. The one chosen, so when they all came out, he looked down, he selected. The one chosen had been in any of the dungeons without bathing for several days, weeks, or months. As a result, these are what are the The reservoirs were constructed by the Portuguese. Rainwater was harvested in them. They used buckets to fetch water for her to bathe. One would ask, where did she had her bathe? She took her bathe just right here. What an embarrassment, what a humiliation. No one ever cared. After this, she was forced to use this door. Step up, and this is the wooden staircase. Connected to the governor's bedroom. She was forced to use the staircase straight up into the governor's bedroom, where she suffered from the governor. After she returned to the dungeon awaiting shipment. In the course of time, some of them became pregnant. Any enslaved woman who became pregnant was not transported because they wanted a strong one for the journey. So they began to build stone houses outside the dungeons, move them in until they gave birth. The children were given European names, they were treated better, they had a school established. They always first superior to those of Tasi because they were the privileged kids because of their skin color. Racism did not begin yesterday. They grew up, some became merchant, intertraders, agents, hence became part of the whole chateau. But some of these men were married before they were captured. As a result, some resisted abuse or rape. Any enslaved woman who resisted rape was subjected to punishment. What punishment was that? Let's find out from the cannonball. This cannonball that we are seeing used to be 8 cannonballs. Each cannonball weighs about 25 kg, equivalent to 50 pounds. Any enslaved woman who resisted was chained to her ankle for 24 hours, no food, no water. In the scorching heat, in the rains, she stood in it. Why? To put fear among the others in the dungeons. This is the balcony meant for the governor to stand, while he looked down to pick a woman of his own choice. The one chosen by the governor used the wooden staircase to come up, and this is the trapdoor. Meant for her to come to the trapdoor straight into the governor's bedroom where she suffered. So this is the bedroom for the governor. As spacious, however it is. And there are 2 little rooms on this side. So 1 bedroom, 2 little rooms, all meant for 1 person inside the structure. As against the dungeons where hundreds lived, suffering, crowded, no one ever cared about the conditions that they were in because Africans were not seen as human beings.
At this point of the tour, I felt overwhelmed with emotion and some sorrow for our ancestors. But in the midst of all of this, I felt this sense of calm mixed with empowerment. It's kind of hard to describe, but it was just a feeling that came over me. And literally, I felt in my spirit someone saying, "Don't cry for me because I survived so that you can make this journey back here."
This is the officers' mess at the dining hall, where they were eating and drinking. Beneath or underneath was a slave dungeon. So you have people having fun, eating, drinking, underneath was a slave dungeon. What an irony. Now you can see a fort on the hill. That fort is called Fort St. Jago. Built by the Dutch in the year 1665. They had soldiers over there to watch out inland, to monitor inland in order to protect the strike from attacks that came from that direction. It always served as a military base for inland protection. And these are cannons that were used to the French. When fired, a cannonball could travel a distance between 1 kilometer to 1.5 kilometers at range. Down here are the moat, the inner moat and the outer moat. At that time, the seawater was coming through the moat. So those who planned to use the frontal view to attack, they end up falling to them because the wooden bridge was always lifted up in the evening and at night. The 4 square yellowish diagram down there is a compass. It also served as a sundial. So this is the time of the day. They always had a pole at the center, and the shadow of it was used to communicate the time among themselves. For instance, I can just look at my shadow and tell you the time that it's almost 10. Almost 10, about maybe 10 minutes to 10.
9:47. Pretty close.
Oh, so that's how in those days our ancestors also used the shadow by looking to the human shadow, which communicate the time among themselves. There's 2 past, 3 past, 4 past, the same thing. That's what they had a sundial, giving them a signal as to the time that they could have their activities run smoothly with a shift system as far as the operation of the soldiers.
Now it's important to know that our ancestors didn't take abuse lying down. Many of them would fight for their right to live. Others would fight by, let's just say, try to unalive themselves.
Slavery ended because of the slave revolt in the plantations. That
Same that happened in the Caribbean.
there was a lot of slave revolt, and that slave revolt, and that was when it forced them to have the laws. And one of the issues that allowed the British to have the law passed in nature was this: you have ahead of the Zong case or the Zong massacre, where a ship named Zong, because of insurance claims, killed more than 130 Africans overboard. The issue ended up in the British court, handled by a famous judge at that time called Lord Mumford. Though they lost the case, but the inhuman conditions were exposed during the court process. That led to a lot of agitation in the whole of the British Empire, together with the Caribbean. So this forced the British by 1807 officially to enact law for it to be abolished.
400 years later.
So it was not their heart to have it done. That is why when they passed the law, all the British slave owners were compensated, where any African country compensated law. And it took so many years. And personally, I keep on saying that if industrial revolution had not begun, I don't think slavery would have ended. Because it got to a point, human labor was no more because of industries. And whatever they wanted to get from the human labor, they have already gotten it. They have built their own countries.
And these things were built by slaves.
Yeah, by enslaved Africans.
Yeah, by enslaved Africans. I'm sorry.
That's the correct way.
Yeah.
I believe the language, because sometimes people use a certain language.
Mm-hmm.
To have a
No, I agree. I
or
agree.
the narrative, which personally,
I agree.
disagree.
This is not a story of sorrow, it's a story of resilience. Despite everything that our people went through, despite the abuse and the trade and everything unimaginable that we went through, despite all of that, we are still here as a people. They couldn't eradicate us. We are not extinct. We're still here and we're not going anywhere. After we finished the tour, we went to do another activity on the lawns of the Coconut Grove Resort, which also has a restaurant there, but I'll talk about that later. The activity we went to do was a meditation activity, which was just kind of like the perfect thing to mellow out what we had just, experienced.
No, just be relaxed.
The last activity we did, which was the perfect way to round out the day, was the naming ceremony. We were greeted by all the elders, which was quite a nice welcome. And then later on, once we got to the palace, we were then briefed again by one of the chiefs about these customs and what will take place and what we should expect.
So the king has asked me to take him through naming giving, why you give name to a child and the process that he passes. So I will 10 minutes. After that, your name will come. We are Akans. We are Akans. And we Akans name a child on the 8th day that the child is born.
Nana Bna Praba. Yes, you sir. You sir.
What is that? Say it loud. Water. Oh.
Nana Bna Praba. Yes, you sir. You sir.
Water.
Nana Abna Praba. Yes, you sir.
Water.
Sir. Nana Bna Praba. Yes, you sir. You sir.
Alcohol.
Nana Bna Praba. Yes, you sir. You sir.
Alcohol.
Nana Bna Praba. Yes, sir. I feel that it's more in penny bars and I come here and say.
And Abna, I think you know your age already, so I'm not going to ask you.
8 days old.
No, your age is. And Abna, are you happy?
Very.
Yeah, it's good to be happy because we're back home. Rejoice. I've got this from this card 3 times. Please tell us what you have said.
Nana Abna Shira. Yes, you sir. You sir.
Water.
He made his water.
Nana Abna Shira. Yes, you sir. You sir.
Water.
Nasilia Akwaba.
Medasi.
Nasilia, you were born on Tuesday as well. Mother Tuesday, daughter Tuesday. You are blessed. So you are Abna. And last night when the family met, the name that our ancestors asked us to give you is Inshira.
Wow.
Inshira, say it.
Inshira.
Wow.
So Abena Inshira.
Abena Inshira.
When we say Inshira, Inshira means blessed. You will be blessed. You will be blessed.
Receive it.
As usual, we always ask for a special blessing for our ambassadors who are continuously bringing our family members home to meet one another. We ask that the open highways, skyways, and byways keep you free and safe from any harm or danger. And we ask the police don't worry you too much. Still, amen.
Victory.
Victory. Warrior does not mean what you think it means. It's not about what these boys and these folks over here use, these toys, these guns and bombs and knives. The spiritual tools for spiritual warriors is what you are doing right now. Returning home, reclaiming your names, reclaiming your heart, your African spirit, and restoring your heritage. This is what is being done. You are fulfilling prophecy. This is no coincidence and not by chance that you are in this particular land right now, especially on your Earth Day, returning home at 70 years young, what I thought was your sister. How blessed we are as a people. All we have to do is remember. That's what the king talks about. He loved the etymology of words. The prefix re. Go back. You have come. Membership. You are meeting your family members right now. You are fulfilling this prophecy. Well done. In spite of all of the atrocities being committed upon people of color around the world, you have the strength and the courage to get on that bird in the sky and fly over here to the land of your natural ancestral inheritance with no fear, with all the airport what they're going to put you through. Go and get these injections and pay this amount of money more than anywhere else, right? But yet still, you said, trip of a lifetime, I have to come and see for myself. And now you have done it. You have done very well. When you do very well, we have a saying. When you do something great, we say this. Ayiko!
Yaye!
Ayiko!
Yaye!
Ayiko!
Yaye!
You have done very well. Ashe.
My trip to Ghana was life-changing, and I honestly would recommend this trip to anyone. And I just hope at some point it's a trip that you will be able to make, you know, whether it's Ghana or some other country on the continent. But I can say for sure, you know, I fully recommend going to Ghana. There's other places that I want to visit on the continent, and when I do, you'll be the first to know about that. But, you know, please like, subscribe. Also, again, questions, anything you want to know about this trip or any other trip for that matter. I'm happy to tell you whatever information that you would like to know. As I mentioned before, I'm going to do a separate video about the process of making the trip to Ghana. We had to do certain vaccinations, and you know, whether you're a US citizen or otherwise, what does that look like, if you need a visa or not. I'll talk about that, and I'll probably talk a little bit about the airline too. We'll see. But until next time, happy traveling.